The reckoning at Widow's Peak. The desert wind carried the stench of death before Samuel Cross saw the bodies. 3 figures hung from a makeshift gallows in the canyon below, swaying like grotesque wind chimes in the scorching Arizona sun. Their shadows stretched long across the red earth, a dark omen in an already cursed land. Samuel had ridden this territory for 15 years as a cavalry scout, and he knew the signs. Bounty hunters, the worst kind of men who traded in human flesh, preying on anyone they could classify as salvage under the corrupt territorial laws. He should have kept riding. His contract with the army had ended 6 months ago, and he'd sworn never to wear another man's war on his shoulders again. But as he raised his spyglass, one of the hanging figures moved. A woman, dark-skinned, powerfully built, with iron-gray hair matted with blood. Her eyes found his across the distance, and in them Samuel saw something he recognized: the refusal to surrender. Even at the edge of death, Samuel Cross had lost his wife and daughter to cholera 3 winters past. He'd buried them with his own hands in frozen ground, and part of him had gone into that grave with them. He'd told himself he was done saving people, done caring, but those eyes wouldn't let him go. The first rope fell with a whisper of severed hemp. A debt unpaid. Samuel's trading post had never sheltered anyone but ghosts and memories. Now 3 strangers filled the cramped space with labored breathing and the metallic smell of old wounds. The woman from the gallows sat upright despite her injuries, watching Samuel's every move with hawk-like intensity. "Name Sarah," she said, her voice rough as sandpaper. "Sarah Blackwood. These are my daughters, Esther and Ruth." Samuel nodded, focusing on cleaning the rope burns that ringed Sarah's neck like a grotesque necklace. The younger women, barely out of their teens, huddled together in the corner, their eyes hollow with trauma. "Bounty hunters claimed we were escaped convicts," Sarah continued. "Convenient lie. Truth is, we owned land near the new railroad route. Rich land. Land they wanted." Samuel had heard it before. The West was being carved up by men with lawyers and guns, and anyone without white skin or political connections was just an obstacle to be removed. "They killed my husband Joseph right in front of us," Sarah said flatly. "Shot him in the back while he was plowing our field. Then they burned our house and dragged us out here to die slow, as a warning to others who might resist." Samuel paused in his work. "I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't plant crops or bring back the dead," Sarah replied. But her voice softened slightly. "But cutting those ropes does." "Why'd you do it, stranger? This isn't your fight." Samuel stared into the firelight, seeing other faces there. Faces of men he'd served with. Faces of families he'd failed to protect during the war. "Maybe I'm tired of walking past fights that should be mine." Sarah studied him for a long moment. "They'll come back. Men like that always do. They won't leave witnesses, and they sure as hell won't let their property walk away. Then we'd best be ready when they do." For the first time since the hanging, Sarah Blackwood smiled. It was a terrible smile, full of pain and promise. "Yes," she said. "We had best." The storm gathers. Dawn broke cold and red over the desert. Samuel stood watch on the trading post's flat roof, scanning the horizon with the patience of a man who'd spent years waiting for death to show its face. He didn't have to wait long. 6 riders appeared from the east, moving with the casual confidence of men who'd never faced real opposition. Samuel recognized their leader, Clayton Webb, a former Texas Ranger turned mercenary. He'd heard stories about Webb's salvage operations all along the frontier. "They're here," Samuel called down. Sarah emerged from the trading post, her daughters behind her. Despite their ordeal, all 3 women stood straight-backed and defiant. Sarah carried an old shotgun Samuel had given her, its stock worn smooth by decades of use. "You know how to use that?" Samuel asked. "My daddy taught me to shoot when I was 6 years old," Sarah replied. "Killed my first rattlesnake at 7. My first man at 19 when he tried to force himself on my sister." Samuel believed her. The riders stopped 50 yards out. Webb dismounted, his hand resting casually on his pistol. "Well, well," he called out. "Looks like someone found our merchandise. You know that's theft, old man." I know you're trespassing, Samuel replied evenly, and that those women are free citizens, not property. Webb laughed, a sound like gravel in a tin can. Free boy, you must be dumber than you look. Those are convicted criminals. I got papers saying so, signed by a territorial judge. Forged papers aren't worth the ink they're printed with. Webb's smile faded. You got a name, old man? Samuel Cross. Late of the 4th Cavalry, Indian Territories. A flicker of recognition crossed Webb's face. Samuel Cross had a reputation earned in blood across a dozen battlefields, but Webb was a prideful man, and he'd come too far to back down now. Well, Mr. Cross, Webb said slowly, here's how this works. You hand over our property, we forget we saw you. Otherwise, we burn that trading post to the ground with all of you inside. Your choice. Samuel's hand moved to his rifle. I choose door number 3. You ride out of here and don't come back, ever. There is no door number 3, there is now. The desert held its breath. Even the wind seemed to pause, waiting for the violence that hung in the air like summer lightning. Webb's hand dropped to his gun. Samuel was faster. The shot echoed across the canyon, kicking up dust at Webb's feet. The bounty hunter jumped back, stumbling, his own draw incomplete. Next one goes through your chest, Samuel said calmly. Your choice. For a long moment, Webb stood frozen, his face a mask of rage and calculation. Then he slowly raised his hands and backed toward his horse. This isn't over, Cross, he snarled. Not by a long shot, it never is, Samuel replied. The riders retreated, but Samuel knew the truth. They'd be back with more men, more guns. This was just the opening move in a game that would end in blood. The price of standing night fell like a hammer. Sarah sat across from Samuel in the trading post, both of them cleaning weapons by lamplight. Outside, her daughters kept watch, taking turns at the windows Samuel had converted into rifle positions. You should have let us go, Sarah said quietly. Would have saved you a world of trouble. Samuel didn't look up from oiling his rifle. Trouble found me long before you did. Still, you don't owe us anything. Now Samuel did look up, his eyes hard as flint. Maybe I owe myself, for all the times I didn't stand when I should have. Sarah set down her shotgun. You were a soldier. You followed orders. Bad orders. Orders that got good people killed while men in uniforms and suits carved up this land like a Christmas turkey. Samuel's jaw clenched. I'm done following orders. I'm done watching people suffer because it's not my problem. So wear your penance. You're my choice. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Sarah studied him for a long moment, seeing past the weathered face and graying beard to the man beneath. A man who'd lost everything and was trying to find a reason to keep breathing. My Joseph was like you, she said softly. Tried to do right in a world that punished righteousness. They killed him for it. I'm sorry. Stop being sorry and start being ready. Webb's coming back, and when he does, he won't give you another chance to surrender. I know. Sarah reached across the table and placed her hand over Samuel's. It was a simple gesture, but it carried the weight of shared understanding. To people who'd lost everything, standing together against the darkness. Thank you, she said, for cutting those ropes, for standing when you could have walked away. My girls and I, we won't forget that. Samuel turned his hand over, grasping hers. We'll get through this. Together. Outside, the desert wind howled like a living thing, carrying with it the promise of violence to come. The siege they came at dawn, just as Samuel knew they would. 15 riders this time, led by Clayton Webb and backed by hired guns from Tucson. Samuel watched them form a semicircle around the trading post, cutting off any escape route. Last chance, Cross. Webb shouted. Send out the women, and you can walk away from this. Samuel stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. Behind him, Sarah and her daughters positioned themselves at the windows, ready. I gave you your last chance yesterday, Samuel called back. You didn't take it? Webb's face twisted with rage. Then burn in hell. The first volley shattered the morning quiet. Bullets punched through wooden walls, Shattered windows, kicked up geysers of dirt. Samuel returned fire, his shots measured and precise. Beside him, Sarah's shotgun roared, the blast catching one rider in the shoulder and spinning him off his horse. The battle was furious and chaotic. Samuel moved through the trading post like a ghost, firing from different positions, never staying in one place long enough to draw concentrated fire. Sarah fought with the grim determination of a mother protecting her children. Her shotgun, a thundering voice of defiance. One of Webb's men tried to flank them, circling around to the back entrance. Ruth saw him coming and squeezed her trigger. The man went down screaming, clutching his leg. But Samuel knew they couldn't hold forever. They had ammunition, but not enough. They had courage, but not enough guns. Webb just had to wait them out. Then the unexpected happened. A rifle shot cracked from the ridgeline above the trading post, dropping one of Webb's men from his saddle. Then another shot, and another. Samuel looked up to see 3 figures on the ridge, Mexican shepherds he'd traded with for years. Men who remembered his fairness and his kindness. The tide began to turn. Caught between 2 fires, Webb's men wavered. Another fell, then another. The mercenaries had signed up for easy money, not a real fight. They began to retreat, slowly at first, then, in a panicked rush. Webb stood alone for a moment, his face purple with fury. "This isn't over, Cross. You hear me? This isn't over." Samuel stepped off the porch, his rifle aimed at Webb's chest. "Yes," he said quietly. "It is." For a long heartbeat, the 2 men stared at each other. Then Webb spat in the dirt, mounted his horse, and rode away, leaving his dead and wounded behind. The silence that followed was deafening. New root spring came to the Arizona desert like a whispered promise. The trading post, battered but standing, became something more than a way station. It became a home. Sarah and her daughters stayed, not out of gratitude or obligation, but because they chose to. They planted crops in the hard earth, coaxing life from soil that had known mostly death. They rebuilt what the bullets had destroyed, adding new rooms, new spaces for the life they were creating. The Mexican shepherds visited often, bringing news and trade goods. Word spread across the territory about what had happened at Samuel Cross's trading post, about the man who'd stood against bounty hunters and won. People began to see the place differently, not as just another lonely outpost, but as somewhere that stood for something. One evening, as the sun painted the desert gold and crimson, Samuel and Sarah sat on the porch watching Esther and Ruth work in the garden. "You know, Webb might still come back," Sarah said. "He might," Samuel agreed, "but he'll find us ready." Sarah smiled, her hand finding his. "Yes, he will." They sat in comfortable silence, to survivors who'd found unexpected grace in the wilderness. The trading post wasn't much, just wood and stone and determination. But it was theirs. Built not on ownership, but on choice. Samuel thought about the hanged bodies he'd seen that day in the canyon, about the choice he'd made to cut those ropes. He'd thought he was saving strangers, but in truth, he'd been saving himself. Finding purpose again in a world that had taken everything from him. "Joseph would have liked you," Sarah said softly. "I wish I could have known him." "You do, in a way. You're standing where he stood, fighting the fight he started." She squeezed his hand. "That's enough." The desert wind blew gentle now, carrying the scent of growing things. In the garden, Sarah's daughters laughed about something, their voices bright and alive. Samuel closed his eyes and let himself feel something he thought he'd lost forever. Hope. The trading post stood against the darkening sky, a beacon of defiance in the wilderness. And inside its walls, people who'd been broken by the world began the slow, painful work of healing. Epilogue. Dear friends, in the harshest lands, courage is tested not by grand gestures but by simple choices, to stop when it's easier to ride on, to fight when surrender seems inevitable, to stand beside strangers when doing so costs everything. Not everyone has the strength to look evil in the eye and say, "Not today. Not on my watch," but those who do, those rare souls who choose compassion over convenience. become the thin line between civilization and chaos. They remind us that one person's choice can echo across time, can plant seeds that grow into forests of hope. Through this story, I honor the forgotten heroes of the Old West, those who stood against injustice when the law looked away, who chose mercy when the world demanded cruelty. Their names may be lost to history, but their spirit endures. Today, we live in different times under the protection of law and justice. We must never forget the price that was paid for these protections, or take for granted the freedoms we enjoy. Live with integrity. Stand for justice. Above all, may you find the courage to cut the ropes that bind the innocent, whatever form those ropes may take. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the dust and blood of the Old West. If this story moved you, let me know in the comments below. Hit that like button if Samuel and Sarah's courage inspired you. And subscribe to support more tales of the frontier. Until next time. May you ride safe trails and stand tall when darkness comes calling.